Hello and welcome to the licensing and ordering training video for AMP for Endpoints. By the end of this module, you should be able to understand the basics of the different deployment models available for AMP for Endpoints, how to properly size and price AMP for Endpoints orders, and also see an example of a completed order. Along the way, I will also include things to keep in consideration when quoting the AMP for Endpoints licenses. AMP for Endpoints can be deployed in two different infrastructures. The first, which is covered by this training, is the public AMP Cloud. The public AMP Cloud is hosted in Amazon Web Services and satisfies most customer needs by providing visibility and protection capabilities when devices are both on and off of the corporate network. The other deployment type is the AMP Private Cloud. This requires its own separate hardware configuration running the AMP Private Cloud software within the customer's environment. This will not be covered as part of this training, so please reference the AMP for Endpoints ordering guide for more details on ordering the AMP Private Cloud. For the public AMP Cloud, there are no hardware or additional software purchases necessary beyond purchases of the AMP for Endpoint connector licenses. AMP for Endpoints consists of two major components. The first is the web-based AMP console. This is used for administrators to configure, deploy, and manage the connectors. It is also where incident investigators and other members of the security team can view and research detection events and the device activity details collected by the AMP connectors. The second is the AMP for Endpoints connectors itself. It is a piece of software that is installed on an endpoint operating system. Currently, we support connectors for Windows, Mac, iOS, Linux, and Android operating systems. Specific on the OS requirements are located in the documentation. If you have logged into the AMP console recently, you'll notice a tab and section named Clarity. Clarity is one component of the Cisco Security Connector, CSC for short. It is the software that runs on iOS devices that provides AMP capabilities. The important thing to remember is that Clarity is inclusive with AMP for Endpoints licenses, so customers purchasing AMP for Endpoints can deploy the Cisco Security Connector and enable Clarity on those devices. Now some highlights on the pricing of AMP for Endpoints. Firstly, all AMP for Endpoints connectors are priced the same, regardless of the operating system deployed to. For example, this means that a customer who purchases 100 AMP for Endpoints connectors can deploy on any of the supported operating systems without additional costs based on that operating system. This includes the Cisco Security Connector for deployment on iOS devices. The final pricing for the connector can, however, change based on two components. Terms. As is standard Cisco fashion, customers can purchase AMP for Endpoints in 1, 3, or 5-year terms. The longer the term, the larger the discount per connector per year. Also, connectors are tier priced, which means there is a lower per connector per year price as the number of connectors purchased increases in the order. I'd like to stress that AMP for Endpoints pricing does not change based on the operating system deployed to, as long as the customer stays within their purchase license count. In addition to the straightforward pricing, it's important to note that AMP for Endpoint subscription licenses are also inclusive of Cisco technical support. There are no additional licenses or PIDs to add for the customer to receive support. One other important note, purchasing only AMP for Endpoints connector licenses allows access to deployment on the public AMP Cloud infrastructure. Customers wanting to deploy on AMP Private Cloud require purchase of an additional software and subscription licenses that are not covered in this training and are available in the AMP Private Cloud ordering guide. From what you just learned about connector pricing, sizing is equally straightforward. When sizing AMP for Endpoints connector purchases, you should base the license count on the total number of devices that will be running an AMP for Endpoints connector. Licensing is not based on the number of users within the organization, but it is a good starting point to determine the total number of connector licenses necessary. When sizing out an order, be sure to consider the following. First is the average number of devices per user. For example, if a customer has 100 employees and they each have approximately 3 devices, you can use this to evaluate that is in line with the total number of devices in their environment requiring protection with AMP for Endpoints connectors. Also, how many servers does the customer have and will deploy AMP for Endpoints on? AMP for Endpoints can be deployed on servers and would require an additional license for each of those servers. Many environments are also utilizing virtualization to host applications for end users. Each OS the connector is deployed on will require an additional license. Lastly, make sure to consider room for growth. While it is possible to add additional licenses after the initial purchase, it's best to have room built in when initially quoting out. As per the previous pricing slide, keep in mind that the discounting per connector will be higher if purchasing a larger number of licenses because of the tiered pricing model. Next, we will go over how to place an AMP for Endpoints order and the required PIDs. CCW is used to estimate and quote out the AMP for Endpoints connector licenses. The PIDs on this slide are here for your reference and your understanding of the structure. CCW will automatically populate the appropriate subscription SKU based on the terms and pricing tier from the number of connectors. There's only one product SKU, FP-AMP-LIC equals, for which you will enter the number of connectors required. Secondly is the subscription SKU. It will be automatically selected by CCW as follows. From the line above, X will either be a 1, 3, or 5, and is based on the term length selected. The default when entering is 1 year. The Z above will be between 1 and 13, and is the tier number based on the connector count entered. Next, I'll quickly walk you through an order estimate within CCW. After logging in, you'll see the above screen. First, search for FP-AMP-LIC equals. This is that required product SKU for AMP for Endpoints. After finding the SKU as shown, enter the quantity of connectors required and click the Add button. In my example, after hitting Add with a quantity of 500 connectors, you will see the entry is fully added to the estimate, including the appropriate pricing as shown on the bottom right. By expanding the entry for the AMP for Endpoints product SKU, you will see the automatically selected subscription SKU for the 500 licenses. In this case, it is FP-AMP-1Y-S3. By default, the term is 1 year, and the appropriate tier was selected based on an entry of 500 licenses. If you are quoting for a longer term of 3 or 5 years, you can click the Edit Subscription link under the subscription SKU to select a 3 or 5 year term. Pricing is also shown to the right. The estimate will be updated after clicking the Apply button. To update the number of connectors, type in the new license count at the top of that same Edit Subscription page as shown here. As you type, the drop-down will show you the subscription SKUs available based on the connector count entered. Be sure to select the one based on the appropriate terms as well, of 1, 3, or 5 years that you are quoting for. Hitting the Apply button will update all of the values and show the new full estimate on the CCW page. After the order is placed, the customer will receive an email from the provisioning backend containing a link. Following the link will allow the end customer to apply the licenses to their existing AMP account after logging in. It's important to note that customers typically already have an AMP console account due to this being a renewal or one was created during the POV process. While following the provisioning email link allows them to create a new AMP for Endpoints console account, customers should first apply to their existing AMP for Endpoints accounts to avoid having to reconfigure and redeploy the AMP for Endpoints connectors. If the entitlement email is not received or any of the details contained within it are incorrect, reach out to the provisioning teams to investigate those issues. In summary, licenses are purchased in 1, 3, or 5 year terms for AMP for Endpoints and are tier priced. For the end user, this means the longer the term or larger the quantity of connectors purchased will translate to a lower price per connector per year. When sizing, the licensing is based on the number of connectors deployed and not the number of users in a customer's environment. It's useful to understand the customer's size, user size, as a solid starting point for determining the final number of connectors necessary for purchase. This is an important distinction to remember as some Cisco products are purchased on a per user basis. AMP for Endpoints is not one of them. From an ordering standpoint, we have one product SKU. The subscription SKUs nested under that product SKU are automatically selected by CCW based on the term and connector count selected during the quoting process. This helps keep ordering straightforward and clean. And lastly, customers purchasing only AMP for Endpoints connector licenses can utilize those licenses on the public AMP for Endpoints cloud. AMP Private Cloud requires purchase of additional licenses for the actual AMP Private Cloud software and subscription services. This concludes the licensing and ordering training video for AMP for Endpoints. Thank you very much.